Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you just fine.
Sweet.
So yeah, I have a
Okay.
few questions typed up, but I guess like the main thing is, of course, it's Q&A. Hopefully, a few people drop in. There's a few of the champion competitors had to leave, say stuff afterwards, but
Yeah.
is there anything you wanted to start off saying?
Sorry, did you want me to start off, Link? Just a second.
Yeah, if you wanted to say anything to start off before we ask questions, or if anybody wanted to.
Well, I thought we might have a couple more people drop in just so I can
Yeah,
say thanks for all your time, because you are the one pushing for the tournaments and stuff like that pretty early. I hadn't really honestly planned to do any kind of like sanctioned quote unquote events until a little bit closer to full release, but I guess we've got a bona fide community manager here in Lincoln. So no, I do appreciate it. And I think the players appreciate it too, right, Lincoln? So good work. Yeah, I actually do have my webcam available. I don't know if we're webcamming it or just
I
audioing
I
it.
did just realize that unfortunately that this specific Discord format does not allow for this webcam. We
And
could
no
move to a
worries.
regular channel, but maybe next
No,
time.
no, 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 no. No, it's
Yeah.
all good. All good. Yeah. Oh well. Don't just let me talk because I'll just talk
Yeah.
forever.
So we are.
Um,
It's our first dev chat that brought to streaming. So there may be people watching vicariously on the different
yeah.
platforms. But I would just like to say it's been great to host the events lately, and I think we're gonna continue with them more. And every time I know Bushman has some nice feedback every time we finish a tournament, but I think we'll make a few more changes as we start getting to something more polished with the community events. Um, but yeah,
I
that's
think again, still early, Lincoln. Like jumping in, like I do think you're doing a great job. I mean, it's kind of like on the fly, right? I know you did a little bit of prep for this one, but the first one in particular, right, was on the fly. You're just trying to bring a good experience out for people who want to try the game during early access, and all that helps build community. And I mean, we are growing here in numbers and growing at about a good speed too. I kind of don't want to grow too quickly because the game content isn't ready for mass exposure, which is again last time we chatted, we're definitely further along now, but I kind of made the same point, which was if too many people are exposed too early, they get turned off because the content still has a ways to go. And while it's got a ways to go, it'll come relatively quickly at this point,
yeah,
just because we're through the major tech hurdles. Everything that the game needs to do, it can now do. I was mostly referring to like decent hit reactions, and all of that stuff will get polished up too as we move forward and get more experience from the players coming back to me saying, hey, it looks better like this, or hey, it would feel better like that. But that draft, just getting it out, the whole system's now in place. Everything's in place.
yeah. I think
That was the hard part. Yeah. So
it was
yeah.
a great segue to the kind of where we come from. Like it started out as pretty bare bones playable, stable, but it's not like quite the feel. But I think you're right. Like we've hit the point now where the feel certainly got to a state where a lot of the regulars are. I think they're finding quite good. I know Zenith and Bushman had a few suggestions. I think those have been largely implemented, and I think this overall that's been coming really well. And I think one of the things that a lot of people are interested in, of course, is the content, which is something we've kind of teased for a little while. Like you said, and now that the core bones and mechanics are there, I guess I'll start off with my first question: is
Yeah.
what type of content are we expecting, and what type of content would be coming first?
So yeah, and I put out just on the general chat just a quick ask to see what the players kind of thought, because I mean there's like a fork right now. Both will get done, but the in my mind, which should come first, and it's like you always want to appeal to players, but at the same time, there's catch 22 built into that, right? Because if we and I'm speaking, of course, to like doing observer mode versus developing the solo game. The problem is, in my mind, is that if we do observer mode too quickly, which is why it hasn't been done yet, we're showing off to a lot of people where the game is, and it's a snapshot of now, as opposed to a snapshot of where it's going to be content rich. And I'd say with in less than 3 months kind of thing, sometime during the summer, I suspect we'll hit our kind of like our full content delivery. So the observer mode, that's why it hasn't happened yet, is just that I haven't wanted to give streamers a tool to kind of mass broadcast yet. I mean, you can obviously in OBS, you can set it up yourself, but as soon as we enable that, and as soon as the keys that I'd set out to our curators on Steam and wherever else, we'll see a lot more people trying to review it. And that's again why I haven't been inviting press. We certainly had a good deal of interest, which is wonderful. I mean, I'm glad the interest is there, but just kind of keep word mum, until content push comes. So that's observer mode. Let's speak briefly on observer mode before I talk about the other side of the fork.
Yeah.
As far as content, observer mode, I'm really excited for because, as we know, our favorite fighting games, multiplayer ones that are already out there, they do some stuff quite well, but I think where we're going to go is going to be fairly unique. I'm really looking forward to kind of using the in-game currency to kind of facilitate betting, on matches. And of course, we'll get people who are throwing matches and people tearing their hair out because, they thought it was going to go one way or another. I think that dynamic of kind of like the virtual gambling will be a lot of fun. We're not going to use real money, so it'll just be game currency.
Yeah, I think it's a important clarification is all cash in the game is earned cash from playing.
You guys have paid your $20. That's all we'll ever ask for. So there'll never be in-game. I think we talked about this last time too. So not going to be any in-game purchases, but you can earn that through combat, either in multiplayer or you can earn it through the solo player game. Just a quick taste of that with the test AI bot that's there now. Sorry, go ahead.
Question before we can move into the more content ideas. I think Zenith has a pretty simple question. Just something we have discussed is the central server for storing information. Do you think that's something that would come after Observer or before, or
it'll be after?
Okay. And then most of the stuff, guys, there isn't really any hard set dates. It's more of a priority list. The estimated date for Observer,
not doing it.
We're not doing that.
Because what happens is if I do an estimate on observer mode and put it out there, then I get held to it. And honestly, if we're going to go in the other direction first, then I'm really not sure. I can say that I do plan to have the fully featured game out, barring again unforeseen circumstances, and those certainly do pop out. I'm planning to have it done within 6 months. So everything out, at that point. And then we'll start to look at different platform builds. But no, I'm not going to say observer mode. And here's why. It's not that I don't necessarily hit the date. It's that I stress about it, honestly. So I'll be like, oh, geez, I chose to do something else. I got off on a tangent, and let's say I decided to do AI and polish that up, and then observer mode gets forgotten for a bit, and then the deadline is a week away for me to deliver observer mode, and then it's just a stress fest. And I don't like to work like that, right? We're still in early access, so as we move through it, I mean, the content will come. You're starting to see the updates come more quickly. The only reason for the delay was simply because he spent a week in the hospital and had a kid, so it takes a little bit of the momentum out of the coding when that's the case. Still, I did pop an update from the hospital, FYI. So there's my commitment, right?
So awesome. And I just wanted to we move further into the kind of content conversation. I did just want to say, Chrono, I do see your question, and I think we'll ask that a little farther into the conversation here. Also,
okay, and just let me pull it back so I can wrap up the content, because we really only touched on observer mode. So observer mode, there's definitely going to be a mechanism to bet on fights. That'll be, and there'll be a ratio, an odds for favored fighters based on their records. That'll be part of observer mode. Probably won't drop with the first iteration of observer mode. The first iteration will likely be just a single camera on the fight, just so we can get it up. But then we'll have a pay-per-view style where you can switch through multiple orbiting cameras and shoulder cameras and stuff like that, and just pop around, so you can really get a neat experience of watching a fight. So it'll be observer mode. I'm playing with the idea, no commitment here too, is of having the observers actually be able to be members of the crowd.
Cool.
It's neat, but I don't know how gimmicky it is versus how useful it will be. Like, we'll have a look. We'll start with the roving cameras and switching between kind of like a feed to actually, I don't know, maybe being able to throw like popcorn at the boxers or something. I don't know, depending on how close you are to them, or beer bottles. No, we'll see. There's a couple interesting ideas that popped into my head to make it a little bit more immersive, but I also have to see how the network handles the number of observers. I got to test around with that too, because of course, the more stuff we do with Fidelity, often the less we can do with the numbers and limiting how many people can actually participate in the observer mode. Mostly the point of observer mode is to, have a smallish group of friends participate all together and be able to kind of like cheer each other on and razz each other and place those bets and stuff like that. Anyway, observer mode. Okay, the other fork and the one that looks like we're going to be doing first is just the single player progression mode. So, that's pretty traditional, where you fight one dude. If you beat him, then you unlock the next, and then you've got other options. So my goal for the AI progression is to have 20 AI bots, progressive difficulty, and you start with Roach. He's just the first one there, and then we'll have 5 per venue with 4 different venues. So you kind of like move through the first 5, and then you earn that switch to the next venue. So it's something to look forward to, and everyone would, I'm sure at this point, would like to fight in a different location because we just kind of have the community gym set up. I like it. It feels a little bit like home at this point, but those new venues will come out with the AI progression.
On the topic
and then
of venues, though.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
So with the AIs as new ones you'd introduce and associated venues, will it be a type of thing where once you beat one, you immediately move on to the other, or do you have to beat them in a certain amount of matches before you progress to the next?
No, it would just, you have to beat them, and like you'll be able to choose from the weight classes that are there, and all of them have their own kind of like ups and downs for challenging the AI, and I'll have to go through and balance that. Right now, it's pretty unbalanced. You can choose the different weight classes, but that really is just a scaler on your hit damage. And on the amount of punches that are needed in a chain to start off a dizzy streak. I can talk more about that if anyone's interested later, but we'll leave it to a question. But the idea is, balancing the AI. You beat an AI, it pops up as the next one in order, and you can always go back and fight other ones, but they unlock as you go. And when you finish the last one, you'll probably get some sort of unlockable for your gym that'll pop in there, whether it's a trophy or banner or something that hangs from the rafters. I don't know yet, but it'll be something like that you can collect and will show up. And Steam achievements too will tie in there. So as you beat your opponents, the Steam achievements will unlock and pop in there and show on your profile as well. So AI, it looks like, is going to be the direction, simply because then we've got more content, more venues to show with observer mode, which should help pull in audience as we move through our early access. So those are the 2 big content pieces: venue, AI, observer mode. The other big piece that ties in with all of that. Well, that's right. The additional avatars for the players, we'll have 8, and then to a degree you'll be able to customize those. I haven't decided yet to what degree. We'll just start with the 8 different avatars for players, because right now we've just been seeing the same dude with different skin and eye colors, and and honestly, that's further along than I had planned to release. With those changes, I was just going to have the one dude, so that happened earlier on. So giving people some options for their avatar. Already records are fairly substantially developed, so there's a lot of stats in there that you can dig into. We've had some people ask for graphs and stuff like that. I haven't decided on that. Those are all just
make
cosmetic.
It so you could export the raw data.
Yeah, those are all just cosmetic things, and I know people love cosmetics. I know but they have to wait, at least on my end, to last, because for me, I don't want to get into replicating a lot of broken game mechanics. So once the game mechanics are solid, and we're really close, like there are some things that are annoying people, and there are some things with hit mechanics that really do need to tweak. But they're just that, they're tweaks, and they're just time consumers. These aren't difficult things at this point. They're kind of like on a to-do list, and I'm just go through and knock them off as I can. And those cosmetic things, which really draw people to the polish of a game, to me haven't really been important at this point. Sure, it's why we get razzed in reviews in some cases, and sure, it's why we don't necessarily attract the people who are just looking for that AAA polish right now. I mean, that's not there, and I hope we've been clear about that in our description on Steam, that it isn't there, and we'll get there down the road. But yeah, game mechanics first, and we're close on that. I think much more close than we were last time we chatted. And yeah, the progress continues. So
question on the
single
player.
one more thing,
right.
because I'm going to forget. No, I'm going to forget. Is just when it comes down to content, like the audience was another big one that I'm really looking forward to getting in, because right now, yeah, it's just it's two guys fighting, but there's no. I mean, yeah, you get into the chat that we provide, or that you've been providing on Discord, which is awesome to get the voice chat feedback, but we need to get proximity voice chat in to the actual matches, and also have that from observers. So that'll be neat. We'll figure that part out about how far away people can be heard and etc. I don't know. Maybe you can pay for better seats. Who knows? A virtual currency. But the idea of having a reactive crowd that cheers for the big hits, maybe they get favorites. So we'll figure that out based on the title of the people who are the fighters that are in combat. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having that, because that'll really be an oomph when people are in fighting. And of course, the number of audience members and the sounds will scale with the venue, which will be a lot of fun. So you can get to the big venues, you'll get that rolling kind of like ambience, which will be a lot of fun when we get into the bigger fights. Okay, so cap there on content. That's most of it. And I'll give it back to you, Lincoln. You can organize.
I just wanted to move before we. I think a big section of this is going to be like kit mechanics and the feel, which has been discussed a little bit and how that works. But before we go there, I did want to. Chrono did ask like a clarification on AI. As the new wins get introduced, they'll be more and more difficult. But is it the difficulty, is it going to be like a linear scale? You said it's associated with weight class. Without getting into the details of like the actual mechanics that works, how would you best describe how difficulty will translate as you move up the AIs?
So it's a good question. Every AI is kind of built around a set of attributes. I don't know if we have any D&D fans, but a lot of it's on dice roll. And so the odds of an AI being able to block, or being able to kind of pivot out of the way, or even reflexively deflect, which is actually some of the top boxing VR games out there don't do this yet. And we'll be doing this with our solo game, such as, the AI seeing that you're punching and then predict and then intercept with, like a sweep away block. Stuff like that's coming, and it's coming really quickly. So that'll be part of what makes it more difficult, is the reflex of the AIs based on their stats. So how many can they block in a row? Are they really accurate in their blocks? How quickly do they counterattack? How hard do they counterattack? If you hit them, how long are they stunned? If you do manage to stun them, how quickly do they go down? How hard do they hit? How quickly can they move out of the way? How quickly can they weave? Are they weaving accurately? And are they dodging your stuff, or just dodging into it? Things like that. Like the first guy's supposed to be a doofus. Like that's the whole point. Like the first AI is just there to get hammered on, and to see how the AI is coming along. It's easy to make him hard right now, I can tell you that. Like it's just a bunch of sliders right now, because that's the way they've been developed, so that we can kind of bulk produce AI that do have some personality to them, but also have a really interesting set of skills, and that's really easy to tweak. So yeah, all of those things will speak to the difficulty of AI, as well as just how hard they're hitting you for, how accurately or how quickly or whatever they're pounding on you. Yeah. So the idea is, to try to create unique boxers, but they are AI ultimately. We know that some of the best VR boxing games out there right now do get repetitive with their AI, and once you've been through and kind of beat them a few times, you're looking for something else, which is, why we are picking up some PvP players here, which is wicked. But I do want to offer a solid solo game so that those people who are kind of like looking for the next thing, they come here to EOC and they want to stay, because there's a really solid solo progression. And the nice thing is, if you're done with beating on the 20 AI and you finished and you're really good, then I don't see why we can't, very quickly put out more AI in expansions, and those will be free. We're not going to charge for those. It'll just be content drops, as we've been doing now with AI, and maybe another venue. It depends, right? It depends on the timeline. So anyway, hope that answers your question, but super looking forward to digging into that.
Just had a few more questions before we kind of get into like the I think the gameplay specifics, and then after that, I would love for you guys, if you would like to, you can raise your hand with the Discord feature, and if you'd like to speak directly to the dev without me intermediating. But one more question here is, you described like other venues might be that are coming. Like, would you consider having more decorative venues? Like someone suggested a venue on the moon or something, something
right.
kind of
They're not going to be the first priority for sure. But again, kind of like there'll probably be more AI to extend the game as we move forward, and depending on the interest that we get in the game. Yeah, totally, it'd be a lot of fun, right? Like, but my first goal is to try to make it. I hesitate to say realistic, because it's VR, and yeah, you can kind of get close on some things, but it'll always be VR, at least at this point. So how well can we do it? Like, how good are our physics? Are hits relatively realistic? Can we push them closer to realism? Like, how far do we take the anti-cheat mechanics, right? Because anti-cheat mechanics, as we saw with the first iteration and early access, was they prevented combos, and that's no good. So we had to scale back and find some innovative ways to try to deal with allowing combos, but still maintaining that kind of barrier on just spam hitting that would just get you KO'd if you were to do that in any other situation. So I'm not interested in introducing windows that people can cheat in with game mechanics. I really do want to keep it to, are your fists oriented right? Like, are you striking with your knuckles? That kind of stuff. Are you staying away from backhands, things that are illegal? Someone I did peek in on the tournament today, and I saw somebody mention, below the belt hits and illegal hits, raising fouls. That is definitely coming. Yep. That is definitely coming. The code for that is kind of like already in. It's just a matter now of me getting to it and weighing it and making sure that I think it's fair and stuff like that before you disqualify a player for too many fouls. You subtract from their score. That stuff needs to be clear. People are going to get mad at why the judges are reducing their score on rounds. And you see some of that with that issue that was brought up where during a knockdown, your player gets up. Okay, why am I not back in the match, but instead you get a TKO or something? And that's just not being clear with the game mechanics. So I do want to, before I drop in more content, I want to make sure it's clear so people aren't getting frustrated with game mechanics that actually are working the way they should, but it's not apparent to our players. And they just get frustrated. Yeah, and that's understandable, right?
On that side of communication things, right now there's the bag, which teaches some fundamental. You gotta punch accurately, you gotta punch hard, gotta move fast enough to do damage. Do you think with Roach or one of the first basic AIs, would there be a very basic elementary tutorial? It's like, hey, here's a pop up. It's like, in EOC we do it this way because as this.
Yeah, no, totally. And that came out of some brainstorming I think we might have done with the moderators last week. Tutorial. Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Tutorials are actually kind of tricky to do, especially in a boxing game. Like, you got to kind of choose, well, when do you pause? When do you demonstrate? When do you show? How do you show the hits? And then you got to line it up so that you're using a consistent kind of, I guess, theme throughout, so that your colors to indicate hits. And then how do you keep it away from it being arcadey versus how do you just like I had my screen diet on me here. There we go. Yeah, so just that kind of stuff. So yeah, tutorial definitely will come, but at the end of the day, if somebody wants to play the game well, I would really like them to develop boxing skills. And can we always make sure that that's what's going on? Well, to an extent, I don't want to limit the fun, but at the same time, I do want people to kind of see this product and say, well, if you want a more authentic experience, this is where you go, as opposed to some of the other stuff that's out there. So my goal is to try to strive towards the realism as much as possible. So yeah, tutorial 2, to answer your question, yeah, that'll be on the way. Also more training targets. I don't want to duplicate the stuff that we see in other VR boxing games. I think most of what's done is done really well, but I don't want to copy that stuff, which is why I went the way I did with the bag. But I still wouldn't mind having like a speed target. I wouldn't mind having a dummy of some sort where you can kind of practice your precision on a form, like a human form. But I just want to be careful about how I do it, so I'm not just regurgitating content that people have seen elsewhere.
And kind of one last thing before I want to open it up is, and there's Zen's asked again, like top 3 priorities. And then before you answer, I would say, like, I think we made it pretty clear right now that the number 1 priority is get the single player, first get the feel correct, which is mostly there and will be continuing to be tweaked. And then second, you would say, would be possibly like the AI, getting that done to a single player playable state, which is enjoyable. And then finally observer mode. Does that sound about right for top 3 things?
Yeah, what was the first? Oh, for hit mechanics. Yeah, probably. I think at this point, hit mechanics are going to be ongoing. So I wouldn't say it's their own category. I think it was its own category before the last biggish update 2 weeks ago or whenever it was that it dropped a week ago. Yeah, I can't remember. But that changed a lot, and it put in place a system. So now how much the player reacts to the different scales of punches that are being thrown, like that's really easy to mess around with. And I think that's probably where we'll get most of our feedback. Like, is the opponent doubling up enough if you whack him in the abs, right? Like that kind of stuff. And again, that's just back and forth tweaking until it feels right. It's all there now and able to be done. Some of the other stuff that I'm really looking forward to doing with hit mechanics, Ice Bear brought up something with people putting their fist out, and the further your fist is from your body, kind of like the easier it is to kind of whack it away, and the greater the hit reaction would be on, say, a glove. If someone's just holding their arm straight out and you hit it, then they shouldn't be able to hold it there, right? Because your center of gravity is closer, your strength is closer to your center, and you're moving it. So I'm going to do that kind of stuff. Actually, that's on my plate. That's not difficult to do. Again, it's just a time crunch. It's just me, and again with my current scenario. I mean, for these guys, most of them don't know me, but I do work full time, and it's not at this. I teach coding and film production and stuff like that, and so this project happens on kind of like when can I get the time to do it, and I do put in as much time as possible. And even before this, like it'd be 16-hour days, which is great. I really enjoyed it, but now with the little one here, it really cuts into what I can feasibly put in. So the nice thing is the foundation is down. That was the hard part. Now it's the really enjoyable stuff of tweaking and the content generation. So I can't wait. Yeah. All right. Back to you, Lincoln.
Yeah. So I have, of course, a few more questions, but at the risk of like just rambling off. Anybody in the crowd like to come up or ask questions specifically? If not, we'll just continue. I have a few things I can ask here, but I think most of this stuff was kind of public knowledge already. But this guy's...
And don't be shy. I mean, the game's for you guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I have no interest in making a game that's just for me. I have no interest in making a game that should be just the way I think it should be. Like, not at all. Like this is a community game. It's why we opened it up the way we did. It's why we take flack for being so early on early access and people, complaining about the fact that this isn't done or that isn't done. But it's on purpose so that we can, collect feedback from a community of players, and so that there's some ownership felt amongst the community that we're developing. So yeah, feel free. Like if there's something that you want to drop down, and if you don't want to do it here, that's fine. But take advantage too of the forum if there's something you want to say or ask.
Oh, I do see a question here. Sorry, gonna look past it here. Chrono was asking about stances. Is there an option? Could there be an option in the future to stagger your stance instead of always being squared up?
100%, and it is already on my list. Yeah, so Southpaw Orthodox will be obviously the ones that we're going to hit up. Now, I was thinking of a couple different ways to do it, whether it was like a button press to kind of like switch. The problem is not everybody holds their body in the same posture when they're in each of these stances. Generally speaking, one fist will be ahead, but not always. And so the trick is from the head tilt of your HMD to your controllers to kind of detect where the player is likely standing in stance. And the problem is, again, not everybody's the same, and you don't want to ask everybody to be the same. So do we do it with just the player chooses and a button press or some sort of gesture? Probably not a gesture because that's pretty ambiguous. And then I don't want to train people to fight, or I don't want to affect the way people fight. If I can possibly help it, yes, VR, you're going to make adjustments for sure. But I don't want to say, hey, to switch stance, you got to do A, B, and C. I just like to be, if you're in that stance, it detects it. So I'm looking at different ways to do that. It's not really a difficult thing to do. It's just there's a couple little complexities, nuances in there. I guess the short answer is yeah, it's totally coming. Totally.
Ice had a interesting question. He's actually out on dinner, but he sent this in anyway. Would you foresee earning cash for a multiplayer? Then you kind of mentioned betting, but that be the only one?
It's already there. It's already there. Whenever you play a pro match.
Gotcha, pro match.
Yeah, so the pro matches already have built-in cash, and it's a good way to earn cash. So how it works is that when you choose to play a pro match, the entry fee for that match needs to be floated by the person who's hosting, and that comes out of their kind of like personal cash, the virtual cash, whatever they've earned. To earn that cash initially, it's by fighting the AI or and that's pretty much how you got to get started, is doing the AI. And back to very briefly to the AI progression. As you progress AI, it costs more to fight them, and you make more. And you can choose how many rounds, right? And you also get a double fee or a special fee if you KO them. So that that should be a lot of fun once it gets going. But anyway, the cash system is in place, and whenever you do a pro match, the host floats the fee, and then the guest also pays a fee, and whoever wins walks away with both.
Awesome. And okay, so I think that certainly answers that one. I think maybe some clarity we could discuss. Hey, play other types of matches if you guys want to earn money. But also, I think that's good for that one. Dosido had this pretty crazy request / question. Full body tracking ? So, is that even a possibility?
Yeah, it's a possibility, and it's not really a difficult thing to do. In some regards, in other ways, it is tricky. So with full body tracking, number one, not everyone's going to have it, and that's one of the reasons I didn't even go with like ankle trackers or anything like that. It's just that it's such a niche market for combat sports, for somebody to go out and buy like $70 or whatever ankle trackers. And then if you're talking about full body tracking, then you're basically wearing a sensory suit or whatever is coming down. There's different brands and different ideas on how to do it. It's easy to feed that stuff into the system because at the end of the day, really, it's just an avatar representing our bodies in 3D space. So the more information we can collect from the boxer or you guys, the player, and pipe in, the more accurate the avatar position is going to be. Right now, we just track HMD. Obviously, that drives the body as well as the position of your left and right controller, and that feeds in. The other kind of like tricky part of it is that there's a fair bit of network traffic when you've got like 3 different spatial trackers. So I'm talking about HMD, I'm talking about left and right glove. That is being relayed for realistic movements in real time. Like that stuff is going pretty fast. Otherwise, and even now with any amount of latency or even really, really fast punches, sometimes you don't even see the end of the punch, right? And it looks a little bit like somebody's just kind of like doing a jab, but really they did a full on cross, and you don't exactly see that. So I am working on some ways around that, so it's much more clear that a full cross has been executed. But at the same time, you're really talking about just fractions of a second. It comes down to system specs, and it comes down to both players, and it comes down to the transport speed in between, because that's a lot of data going back and forth on 3D positions, and that's only 3. So on full body tracking, now you're talking about however many points of tracking the data, and you're relaying all of that, right? So you can see how that exponentially can become more difficult to manage as far as your network. And then if you're getting into observer modes, then you're rebroadcasting all of that data again. So I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, but I would say I'm certainly focused on left and right glove and HMD and making it work as well as possible without latency issues for that. And then from there, I'm more actually interested in haptics. Like I wouldn't mind, getting some haptic feedback. My wife just popped by with the baby, so she's just saying hi. She's got in, so I guess. Yeah, and then so haptics. So like feeling when you strike, getting some feedback on your controllers, and then there's some neat stuff coming out with haptic suits too. But again, and peripherals where people talk about like, feeling the pain, and the last thing I need is like somebody to get struck in the head and end up with a concussion, right? Because their haptics was turned up, too high or something. That's coming, down the road. But yeah, I think just the feedback from striking, it will be the first thing out. Again, really easy stuff to do. It's just a matter of time and getting it in the list and then out. That'll be more like kind of end of early access stuff that'll just pop in. I know it would feel great right now, but there's so many other things as far as the content drops that have to happen, and then we'll kind of polish it all up and drop all that stuff in. I know most of you would probably love to see it right now, and I certainly know people browsing us on Steam trying to decide if they want to make a purchase would love to see it, but I just see the game mechanics. I want this to be a great boxing game, and then those little polishes can come and they'll tweak it up. I hope that answers your question. Full body tracking, not right away. Long-winded, I know, but yeah. Tying into haptics and all that.
The question for you here is from Shalupa Batman, and he is asking about can you push someone off when they get close? Because right now the announcer does say it after a little while, but actively moving another avatar with your like a purposeful gesture.
Okay, so the answer is you can. It's not currently in. I did a lot of experimenting with this kind of VR force pushing in multiplayer with a previous title that I was working on, and it is possible. But if you guys picture, you're kind of like your VR rigs and your spaces, right? If somebody is shoving you, then suddenly your space has shifted and you've been forced into a location where you probably aren't actually in your VR space. And so when you start doing the shoving and being able to move somebody else's avatar, and this comes into play too when people are preventing your avatar body from moving through walls and stuff like that. It's why a lot of VR games don't even do it. Some do, but for example, being able to put your head through the wall and just see what's on the other side of a one directional mesh. A lot of VR games don't even bother with that. And it's not that it's super difficult to do, it's just that it displaces the player and the rig within their space. And there are lots of ways that you can kind of deal with that, and many games do it in different ways. I guess probably, again, to get to the short answer of it, trying to push somebody else off you, what happens if they push back? Right? Yeah. And that's the hard part. So you've got one force. So sure, I could say, hey, I'm going to do a shove, but why is that a shove and not a punch? Okay. So you could say, well, maybe a shove is a slower force, and then that's a push, and then it makes contact, and then, okay, you're pushing the other avatar away. But now what if their glove is out and you're pushing against their glove, and really you just picture two VR players in their spaces just kind of pushing against nothing. What happens? And really you're just kind of just delocating each other within your play areas. And so that becomes quite difficult to deal with. It can be done, but I don't think people would like the results. So I would say probably not right now. I think most people who are ultimately going to end up in Era of Combat are probably going to want to play it because it brings them a bit of a breath of a nice physics system. I hope, at least I want to get there. And they're playing it for the boxing element. I mean, yeah, shoving is a part, but it's like we're not going to be doing jiu-jitsu in VR anytime soon, right? Yeah. It's tricky, and mostly it's tricky because we're not in a holodeck type of area. We don't have any control over real mass and we don't have any control over locomotion. And there's still lots of innovative ways to solve locomotion, or at least attempt to solve locomotion within VR. I think once that gets probably a couple decades further along, we'll see some really neat stuff coming out, and then maybe there'll be a way to transfer force properly. But right now, it's really expensive peripherals and a lot of complexities that probably don't add to the game as much as we might think they would. I want to be careful there,
Yeah.
because maybe, hey, for you they do. Maybe for an individual, they really want that, and I don't want to devalue what you're saying. It's just that, man, it's a lot of work. It probably won't be able to be realized by all of our players, and so it's not something that I would tackle right now. I've got future combat games coming down, and that's something I wouldn't mind looking at then, but I don't think we're quite there yet with our tech. Yeah. Anyway, just thoughts.
Yeah, I think that was really in depth, and I think that was great. Kind of describe more like so the thought process behind it, and it kind of ties into what people are talking about as well. Like when you can actually enter the other person's avatar, whereas if that was stopped, still you still now have that disconnection
Well,
between
the things that I
yourself
can,
and the avatar.
yeah, the things that I can do there, like there are things, that we can do, like we can turn the player black. Sorry, not the player black. We can turn the camera black it out when you're inside the other player, so it doesn't give you much advantage to try to be in the other player you can't see, and then they pop out. Like we can do that kind of stuff. But yeah, you can also make the avatar bodies collide, but again, you got to be kind of careful about pushing people out of their play areas, and just be cautious about that kind of stuff too. The clinching can be more broad, so we can do things like broaden the radius that a clinch entails. So instead of being like right on top of the body, you've got a little bit more play, so you actually have to stay at a more reasonable punching range. But still, some people's styles are more in close, right? And I don't want to dissuade people from playing close. I do want to dissuade people from taking advantage of, I won't say it's a flaw, because it's just kind of like, well, maybe it is. Yeah, limitation's a good word, of the gameplay. It's kind of like the problem that was brought up about forcing people to stay within each other's play areas, which is a really valid question. Like if you've got somebody who actually has a full boxing ring, to play in, because they've got a big, like a warehouse or whatever at home, or they're outside or whatever, and then you get somebody who's in a cubicle size apartment with like maybe 4 square feet, like then yeah, I mean, obviously the person in the smaller play space is not going to be able to touch them, and the person who's in the large area can kind of like just dodge in and out and do whatever they want. So I mean, there's ways to deal with that, and probably we'll have some solution in place. There'll probably be some sort of overlay to see what is the communal play area, so that would be an overlay of the smallest players area in both players' view. I don't want to do it in such a way that it's not invasive, like you don't want it to take you out of the match, but maybe if you spend too much time outside of that, you're not focused really on the boxing match so much as you are focused on the exploit of your size, right? Which I can see that being an issue, and maybe that's something that could also be turned on or toggled on.
Yeah.
So what do you do then if somebody is exploiting it? Well, you could have the ref give them a foul, and if they accumulate too many, they take point hits. You could have their health drain out while they're outside of the communal area. There's all kinds of stuff that we could do to deal with it. I think I'd probably like to leave whatever solution is put in place in the hands of the players, kind of like we did with weight classes, because people like to play different ways. And if you're hosting with a buddy, you should be able to play the way you want. Tournaments would be more formalized, and hey, these are the weight classes, these are the rules for the tournament. But that can be set by the tournament hosts, and then people who play in the tournament obviously want to play with those rules, or they don't, and they'll go somewhere else. That stuff's all there. Again, these are, I don't want to say cosmetic. There's certainly important game mechanic things, but for me, I want people to hit each other and for it to feel good and for the judging to be accurate. And I think we're really close on those. And now we can start pecking away at the smaller stuff that just polishes it up, and then get the content going.
Yeah, awesome. And I know like that kind of answers a few questions people have had, because over the little while in Discord, a couple of people have been asking and wondering about accommodations and movement mechanics for people with smaller play areas. And I think it is, at the end of the day, until some kind of thing like you described is created or not. It's you just kind of have to deal with what you got, right? There is a minimum play space, unfortunately, on the Steam page. It's a limitation of the real world. It's not really something that can it can be
Well, if we want to
adapted.
make again, careful with the word realistic,
Yeah.
but if we want to make a more realistic, quote, VR boxing game, then your locomotion needs to be, in my opinion, the
A one-to-one.
locomotion. Yeah, I mean, if suddenly you're giving people thumbstick control, then number one, you're not focused on your punching, you're focused on playing a game,
Hmm.
right? You're not focused as much on strategy. You're focused on, well, maybe strategy that's enabled or manufactured because of a game mechanic. And I do want to try to stay away from that and give people as authentic an experience as possible. Again, being careful with the word, but like if you have a thumbstick, then yeah, I mean, there's problems. You can then everybody's focused on maneuvering with a thumbstick as opposed to, you know, moving around in what area they've got. And yes, people with a smaller play area will be disadvantaged. There are other things that we can put in to kind of make up for that. But me personally, I'm not interested in having game controller type movements. That's why it's not a traditional PC game. I chose to make a VR game because I wanted it to be immersive and speak to the mechanics of boxing. Now, saying that, I wouldn't rule out, you know, options popping out for people who want to play that way, but they're not a priority for my early access. Kind of like they could come in down the road.
Gotcha. And kind of moving out of that line of thinking here, or thought process, Chrono had an interesting question about using shoulders to block, like being able to bring your shoulders up to cover your chin.
So, how are you tracking your shoulders?
Hmm. Exactly. I think that's the main question, right?
Okay,
'Cause you
so
gotta
you
contain
can't
it somewhere.
unless you have, yeah, unless you have shoulder trackers, uh, or unless you're saying, hey, this motion that the game recognizes that you're making with your fist and your head together would cause this action. But again, then you're kind of interpolating a non-boxing mechanic by using a game strategy. And so I agree that would be a great thing to be able to do, but I don't see how it would fit without, you know, actually having physical trackers, like again, full body tracking or at least upper body tracking. And some way to track where your shoulder position actually is, because your whole body position is being derived from your HMD and from your left and right controller. And that could be fairly accurate, but it's not going to have those nuances unless you're artificially inducing some sort of map pose that the players are then trained to take to make your character perform that way. Which again, I want to stay away from. I don't want to train people to do this because, you know, when I go to the gym or if I'm actually sparring, I don't want to like then start hunching into this weird position, you know, in real
Yeah.
life. You know, I don't want to get in the habit of doing that. And there's already enough bad habits that get picked up in VR fighting games. So I'm doing my best, which may or may not be enough to try to keep it, you know, as authentic as possible.
And I think Triple had another question here, which was he wasn't quite sure if it was stated somewhere before, but how does punch power work? Is there a cap per weight class?
Okay, there's no cap, but yeah, it's a good question. So basically, like all boxing games, for the most part, your at least your initial punching power is speed. It has to be because there's no way to capture mass, right? So basically, what most boxing games are doing is they're taking like an average weight and then they're multiplying it by a force delta, which is your change in force between frames that your controller is moving, and then you're using that to calculate like a Newtonic force or a PSI or something like that. And that's the same thing we're doing. But saying that, we're a little bit more nuanced in that I'm really looking at what part and how your fist is oriented during the strike. As a martial artist, it's important to me. I like the martial aspect. So if you're not striking with your four knuckles and your glove arranged properly, and we do look for that. We're looking at what's being hit by the proper knuckle orientation at the moment of impact. Then you're not getting basically the full oomph. You're still getting damage, but it becomes much more difficult to take down your opponent. So I'm trying to encourage proper striking techniques with fist orientation as well as technique. But again, there's only so much we can do to encourage quote unquote proper technique. You're already holding a controller, for goodness sake. You do that, you're gonna break your hand, right? In real life. So so force is calculated again by vector deltas, and then we're looking at the orientation on strike. And then there's a bunch of categories. I think it's like weak, low, strong, powerful, and then superior. And so what I'm doing is I basically took as hard as I could possibly punch and said, well, there's going to be people who can strike quite a bit harder than I am. And I just use that as a gauge. So I can't hit the bag as hard as it can be hit. I know there'll be people out there who can hit a lot harder. And so those are categorized for things like the targets, for example, on the bag. And then that's translated into kind of like subcategories on impact during the fight. And so I look for how close to critical targets people are. So I call that hit quality. So that's your precision. So if you don't come anywhere near to a precision target, it's just a general hit, and your damage is just the base factor of whatever your force was when you struck and your fist orientation. But if you do get closer, and there's about 5 different factors of proximity, so down to like it's really small, like a 1/16 of an inch or something. It's really pinpoint. And if you are right on like a temple point or a jaw point, or if you can manage to get an uppercut, the chin, it's tough, doable, but tough. Or say the liver or solar plexus to a degree, any of these points, then you get multipliers for that damage. And that's where you're starting to get that grunt from your opponent. It still needs to be balanced a bit. Like I'd like to have different, indications that people recognize of, hey, okay, it was this hit quality. If you look pretty closely, like there are colors and sizes and little kind of like dispersion starbursts when you hit that do indicate those things, but they're pretty subtle. I didn't want them again to become arcadey. Mostly, it's just, it needs some refinement. That's just again on the to-do list, but I hope that kind of answers your question. As far as, I think weight class was in there too, though, right? So with weight classes, what I did is with the 8 different weight classes, I took what some people in the community really liked about heavyweight, or about the changes that came down and made that the heavyweight class. There's no changes at all in between heavyweight and what we were playing with a couple days ago before weight classes.
The most kind of true to.
Well, I wouldn't say true. I wouldn't necessarily say true. It's the easiest to chain combos with. You need fewer chained punches. So every time that you hit and land qualifying strike. So a qualifying strike, something that's not blocked. It's something that lands clean. It's something that lands with a minimum amount of force. I think it's kind of like halfway through the force scale. So it's not just like a light hit. If it's those things, then it counts as a punch chain. And as you accumulate those, it's exponential. So like the first one, I'll just use numbers here to make it easier to understand. The first one might do 1, and then the next in the punch chain is 2, and then 4, and then 8. And it depends on your weight class, how quickly those duplicate and replicate. On heavyweight, it's very quick, and you only need about 6 before it's very likely that your opponent will enter a dizzy state, no matter what their health is, and you'll be able to advance them through that dizzy state. There's about 4 different levels of dizzy state, and then they're down. Every level of dizzy state that your opponent is in, there's a greater chance that the next strike will take them down. And on heavyweight, all of those they're just more prominent. If you go down the weight class system, then the number of punches needed to chain increases and your punch damage decreases. So that when you're down, I think I went with featherweight as the lightest one. It's like your punch damage is divided by 5. So that's as opposed to the heavyweight. So that's all the way down the scale. So that's to allow for people who are more really just interested in the cardio blow, right? Like to just get in there, like have your punch fest. You really want that workout. It hit somewhere in the middle if you want the mix, which is why we did it that way. And then, yeah, people just kind of choose how you want to play. Also, entering dizzy state, it's not just the chain of combos that affects it, because you can become dizzy at any point once your health has been reduced to a certain point. I think it's 75%. When I say health, each body part has its own health cap and HP. And so when you get struck, depending on the power and the precision of the hit, your overall health cap for that body part is reduced a percentage, so it can never kind of charge back up or regenerate past that point, and you take damage. So you always take more damage than the cap is reduced, and then over time you kind of get worn down, especially if somebody's hitting precisely. That precise hits reduce the cap more, and then you cannot regenerate back with a break past that reduced cap. So you start with certain defaults. That's based on the length of your match. So if you're doing like a 3-minute round and you're doing like 12 rounds, then you've got a lot more starting health for all your body parts than you would, for example, if you did 1 round at 90 seconds. So yeah.
Go
ahead.
If you, does that mean, because each body part has its own like health cap and does get reduced. If you just focus, let's say, like completely on someone's arm, like the left arm, after enough hits, it empties the health. Is that you can no longer use that, or are you KO'd?
So the arms don't take damage because they're used to block. I did have at one point the forearms taking damage, but then I was like, realistically, like you can take an awful lot of abuse on your forearms from a gloved opponent before, you're not really going to be knocked out by getting hit on the forearms, right? So like so I mean a better example might be your temple. If somebody is repeatedly wailing on your temples and they're hitting them because your guard sucks, then you're going to go down really quickly. So the idea is, you got to keep your guard up and prevent those hits, especially subsequent hits, because once your cap's reduced, you're going to go into your next round with almost nothing in that particular point. So you're vulnerable, right? It's an approximate mirror of getting beat down, right? As opposed to just a hit point meter, right? And you just hit, and wherever you get hit, it just reduces your meter. I wasn't really interested in doing something like that. Some games do it, I guess, but teach their own.
Yeah, it's kind of all the questions we have here in the chat here. Is there anybody had any else they wanted to ask here while we're gathered in this place? If not, I think that's round about it for this.
Yeah, no problem. Well, we'll give everyone a few seconds to think if there's something they want to ask. But just a quick shout out to everybody who's decided to take a chance on trying this game early. I mean, I really appreciate your feedback, and I do take it seriously. I hope that in the updates that are coming out, you're seeing that stuff reflected. Not everything will come as a high priority, obviously, because I still have to move the roadmap of the product along. But I do take them seriously, and as my time allows, I'll certainly knock off things that I think enhance the game, and almost all comments do to some extent. I see a hand, Lincoln.
Yeah, we see a bush. I'll let you in. Right, you're welcome to come on. I think you gotta respond on your phone there. Yeah. I think you need to click a button, Bush.
It took me a minute to figure out too.
Yeah, it does take.
I don't do a lot of
there.
Discord forums.
I get used to it, Yeah.
But you do, as you're setting everything up, yeah.
I think the next one will just be regular chat, and I'll do some configuring for that. I think Bush, I invited you up, so you gotta accept the invite on the buttons there. Awesome.
Right. Now it's working.
Fantastic.
I'm muting on myself, but okay. I just had one question. I posted in the chat. It's not really a question, just a suggestion. But in this game, Gorn, it's a VR game. You can have another player watching on the screen, press a button on a controller connected to the computer, and then they can take control of somebody. So I think it would be pretty cool if you could have a local co-op, and like somebody at your house could control on a screen with just like, I mean, it's super unfair, but it's still really fun. And then, you know, you could box with your girlfriend while she plays on the screen or whatever, because she's not interested in actually VR.
Oh, you mean like non-VR versus VR?
Exactly, yeah, like asynchronous co-op. So it would be like once the observer mode camera's in, you could be fighting an AI, and then like, you know,
I
they
see.
press
With
start,
AI. Yeah.
and then
Yeah,
they
you
would
know what?
take control of the AI.
Yeah, so I've actually I've written that kind of stuff before. Actually, the last one I was working on allows for a mix of VR and non-VR. So it's an interesting suggestion. I guess because you know the PvP is kind of built in. I guess you're kind of saying like for people who aren't interested in VR, they might be able to do it. I don't see why not. I would probably leave that until like a little bit like down the road, because it would be really simple to map like the AI stuff over to a controller, and then let them do. I could see how it would be a blast though. You know, like totally. So yeah, I'll remember that. I won't. I'm not going to promise it anytime soon, just because man, I got a full slate. But it's a cool idea, and yeah, I'd be down for doing something like that for sure.
All right, thank you, Bush, man. Really appreciate that, and thanks for
Yeah,
competing
yeah,
earlier.
it's a neat thought.
Yeah, and I think I just kind of wanted to say, you'll start seeing that as the content starts rolling out, like this summer, as we talked about. Updates will continue to come. We'll host a few more tournaments, of course, and once Observer gets in there, they'll be a bit more fluid, as people that have participated can attest that Discord streaming is not always the most reliable. But yeah, you guys, we have streamed this to the Twitch and our YouTube, so if you'd like to follow that there, you can catch all the future tournaments there. As well on the YouTube, we'll start posting highlights of some of the tournament matches, but nothing too crazy yet, because like we said, we're not quite at that stage. But yeah, just letting you guys know what's coming down the pipe.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so I got to take off, but again, I appreciate everybody's feedback. The game exists because you guys are interested in it, right? You want to play it. I do too, and yeah, it was just it's moving fast, right? Like the game started being developed in late August, just this last August, right? So, I mean, that's pretty quick, and we'll be getting faster now, simply because I mean the main technical obstacles have been overcome, and now it's content generation. Unfortunately, the other part of that is now we've got another family member, so I will find the time, but if I'm not, you know, you can just picture me feeding a little baby here and like wishing that you know I was typing on some code, but not really, because you know she's really cute. So all that. All right, thanks everybody, and thanks Lincoln for hosting this. You've been putting in a lot of hours, and this guy's not getting paid, y'all. So big shout out to Lincoln, because well, we did give him a VR headset as a thank you.
That's pretty good payment.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. But eventually, hopefully, we have enough folks here to justify bringing him on as our community manager, because he's doing a great job. All right. Have a good day, everybody. Lincoln, I don't know if you want to wrap or if that's the wrap, but
Yeah,
whatever.
that's basically it.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. We'll have another tournament before too crazy long, and we'll hopefully have a lot more options and polishing for that.
All right, I'm gonna end the stage. Have a good night, everybody.
See you later, man.